Jose Altuve and Kyle Tucker are as hot as a Houston afternoon, but the Rangers are rolling. And don't look now, but a familiar foe is in the rear view. It's episode 36 of Stone Cold Stros, and it starts right now.
The Houston Astros, world champions!
Welcome into Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange, joined by Charlie Palillo and SportsMap.com's Josh Jordan. Follow them at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 on the platform formerly known as Twitter. It's now X. I don't even know how to say that now. And be sure to hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The full version of the podcast, as always, is up right now on all those audio podcast providers that you get your podcasts from. So go check that out if that's what you want to do. And if you're not watching or listening to Sports Map content, make sure you're listening to ESPN 97.5 or 92.5 on your radio dial in Houston. Charlie, we always highlight a player who wore the same number as the episode. Where it's not a ton of options at 36. A couple stand out. I'm going to take a wild guess that you're not going to go with Russ Springer.
That is correct. I'll give a quick tip of the cap to Will Harris, but we're going with Joe Niekro. Nuxie, the winningest pitcher in Astros franchise history, not Nolan Ryan, not Roy Oswalt, who's just one win behind. Joe Niekro with 144 wins, pitched one of the great games in Astros history. First time they ever made the playoffs was 1980, last weekend of the regular season. Astros went to Los Angeles with a 3-game lead over the Dodgers. The Dodgers swept them 3 games straight. Dead heat after 162 games, 1-game playoff necessitated. Niekro was brilliant. Astros won the game 4-1 to go into the postseason. A quick Jim DeShays story, read Joe Niekro. It was a different time back in the 80s when men were men, when pitchers routinely went 7, 8, or, hey, I'm going to finish what I start and go all 9 innings. DeShays, during a Cubs telecast a couple weeks ago, regaled with this one. At the end of a Niekro start, there would be 9 little puddles of soda in the Astros dugout, at least when Niekro went all 9 innings, because when Nuxie would come to the dugout, well, he'd light up a butt there in the dugout, and when he went back to the mound, he'd put it out in a little puddle of soda, 1 different puddle for each inning of the game. Things we won't see in 2023 and beyond. But Joe Niekro, our 36 honoree, and yeah, we're getting more challenged going forward with these higher numbers, but Joe Niekro, completely worthy.
Good stuff. Well, guys, let's get into it because we have a smoking hot division race. See what I did there? So, like we said at the beginning, Jose Altuve, Kyle Tucker, just absolutely mashing right now. The Astros are winning series, but the Rangers are too. And don't look now, but the Mariners are 8-2 in their last 10. So the schedule favors the Astros here going forward the rest of the way. But the Mariners, this late season push here, how much more important now does it mean for the Astros to try to wrestle away the division lead from Texas?
Oh, look, it's massive, right? You have a 2-front war. The Astros are looking ahead, thinking reel in the Rangers, win the division, be the 2nd seed in the American League, don't have to deal with that shotgun round, best out of 3 wild card. A lousy team can beat a great team 2 out of 3, so you want to avoid that certainly if you can. But the great pitcher Satchel Paige said, don't look behind you because something might be gaining on you. That's the Mariners, relatively speaking. The Astros are 18-10 since the All-Star break. That's wonderful. Well, they've lost ground to the Rangers since the All-Star break. The Mariners piping hot recently till the Orioles cooled them off for a couple of days because it's what the Orioles generally do. The Astros winning 2 out of 3 there was strong, even though they couldn't get the sweep, just as they couldn't quite get the sweep against the Angels. But over these next 3 weeks, the Mariners are poised to maybe catch either the Astros or the Rangers. If the Rangers just keep playing the way they're playing, they have the 2.5-game cushion over the Astros. The Mariners are 4 further games behind them. But the Mariners have beaten the Astros 5 out of 7 to this point. So this weekend, right, Seattle comes in and wins 2 out of 3. The Mariners wrap up the tiebreaker over the Astros, along with gaining ground on them in the race. And you alluded to the schedule. It favors the Astros absolutely overall relative to the Rangers the rest of the way. I noted this in the column the other day. There are 9 basically crapola teams in Major League Baseball, defining that as if you're 10 games under 500 or worse, you stink. There are 9 such teams, A's, Royals, so on. The Rangers now only have 6 games remaining against those not so nifty 9. The Astros have 12 games remaining against those 9 teams combined. The Mariners have 19 games against the Dregs, and a whole bunch of those are over the next 3 weeks. Right? The Mariners are here for 3 games this weekend. The 13 games around those Astros games, the Royals 7 times, the White Sox 3 times, the Mets 3 times, and there's one other series in there. 16 of their next 19 games are against lousy teams. So the Mariners stay generally hot. The Astros are going to have some company tucked in right behind the Rangers here sooner than later. Big series this weekend.
Yeah. You know, when you look at the stats, the team stats for the season, Astros, really nice. You know, 3rd in team ERA. You know who's in front of them? The Mariners. So that's what's tough. They're at number 1 right now, and then the Blue Jays follow them. So that's been the Astros calling card, is the pitching, and the Mariners are doing that even better than the Astros at this point in the season, which kind of makes me want to point out I'm tired of these possible sweep opportunities, and I don't feel like they're putting their best lineup out there. That's been a typical, criticism of Dusty. Maybe the best lineup's not out there, but it seems like if they win the first 2 games of the series, that last game, you're going to see Greg Kessinger and, some of the guys where you're like, what are you doing? Why not try out, go get that sweep? It's that whole thing that Granado's been talking about. It just feels like Dusty's not managing with the urgency that we would hope at this point in the season.
I mean, there is a balance for the manager. You're playing the long game, day game after a night game. You're typically not going to go with the same catcher, unless sometimes it's Maldi, just because. And, sitting Pena for a day for Dubon, it's not like you're dropping prime Cal Ripken for a backup. Abreu's injury, right, pretty nebulous. Some lumbar inflammation. That's not an injury. That's kind of easy to make up if you're saying, we need to just shut this guy down for a few days and pump him with formaldehyde or something. So Singleton gets his little window of opportunity. What can he make of it? I mean, Singleton's already drawn 5 walks. Abreu drew 31 in 4.5 months. So, if you don't have your optimal lineup out there every day, that's understandable. The Rangers rest some guys too, the Orioles, the Mariners, everyone else is going to do that. But when you rarely have your optimal lineup out there because of just a couple of daffy decisions you keep on making, well, that's a delight, not just for second guessers, right? Plenty of people among us, fans, observers paying attention, have been able to point to things all season saying, Dusty, why? What are you doing? Not just because it's a day game after a night game where you can justify resting a guy or 2.
It is interesting, though. It's like the story of the season has been kind of guys being able to step up. You lose Jordan and Altuve, but then Chas McCormick starts tearing the cover off of the ball. You get Jordan back, and now Chas has kind of regressed a little bit. Granted, I know, he's dealing with, I guess a bruised knee or something along those lines. Jordan Alvarez, though, last 7 games, hitting 138. His slash line is basically half of what Martin Maldonado's has been over the last 7 games. Now, granted, Martin Maldonado has been hitting well. I mean, he's hitting 304 over his last 7 games. So credit where that's due. And maybe that kind of speaks to kind of the balancing act that the Astros have been able to pull off so far this season. But it has been kind of they're walking a tightrope, right? And so they've needed these unexpected performances. Abreu goes down. John Singleton gets called up, a guy who we've said you can't really expect too much from. You just got to, Charlie, I think your specific phrase for it last week in regards to Singleton was you hope to run into something. Well, they seem to have run into something where a guy who's way more patient at the plate than Yainer Diaz, and in his first, has a multi-home run game already under his belt. We'll see how long, he can sustain that. The patience at the plate certainly bodes well for them going forward. How confident are we, though? Because this has been a balancing act. It hasn't really seemed that the Astros have been able to get everybody right or everybody hot at the same time. They also haven't seemingly needed to get everybody hot at the same time. They scored, 22 runs in the first 2 games of the series without really Bregman or Jordan doing much. How confident are we that the Astros can get everybody hot at the same time at the right time?
I mean, if the right time is the postseason within a short stretch, that kind of stuff, magic can happen. But this just is not a super premium top to bottom lineup anymore. Singleton can give you more than Abreu, perhaps, but gee, we're setting a real high bar with that. And then whatever combination of Myers and Kessinger, Pena and Dubon and Maldi, that's a weak bottom third of the lineup when you go back to the Astros of 2017, 2019. So, when you harken back in Astros history to lineups that had Adam Everett, Brad Ausmus, and the pitcher batting 7th, 8th, and 9th, and you're getting somewhat similar production to that, the Texas Rangers have much more depth to their lineup. And Brandon, you hit on the essence of what sample size is about, that for 1 week, hey, Maldi's outperformed Jordan. Jordan's 4 for his last 32. If Alvarez hits 125 the rest of the season, I predict the Astros miss the playoffs entirely. There's no chance of that happening, just as there's no chance of Maldonado hitting 300 for the rest of the season. So the Astros, and Chas was just due to level off, in addition, if he has a little bit of a bruise problem. But you look at the Astros lineup, 1 through 5, pretty studly. I mean, Bregman's a little better than average, no better, but Altuve's been magnificent. And the walks that he is drawing by the bucket load, right? His on-base percentage well over 400 since he's returned. He's never walked like this in his career. Add that to a 315 batting average, and, well, that's how you get awesome. Jordan, you expect to, over time, be Jordan. Kyle Tucker's probably a top 5 MVP guy now. And then you have Chas, so there's your top 5. But after that, it does largely fall off a cliff.
Yeah, it does. But to the point y'all just made, Singleton, he doesn't have to be that great to be better than Abreu. He just has to not be one of maybe the 5th worst hitter in all of baseball. So, and we saw some great defense from him. Chandler Rome made the point that Dusty likes to put out his best defensive lineups, especially when Verlander and Fromber are pitching. Singleton was out there in that spot. So they trust the defense. He looked pretty good. So I want to see him keep playing here. We pulled up the stuff with Abreu. Before the injury came out, he went 9 straight games without an RBI, hitting in the middle of the Astros lineup. I mean, you just can't have that. Anything would be better. So I'm curious to see what Singleton can do over the next week or so. We'll see what happens with Abreu, but he complained about the back earlier in the year, but he's not blaming his performance on the back. So I'm just curious to see what they're going to do heading into next season if Abreu can't turn this around.
A 36-year-old declining player with back issues probably didn't help that the manager had him in the lineup all but 5 games through the first 4.5 months of the season. When you're in a close race, every incremental improvement helps. Sure, we all would have loved to have won that $1.5 billion Powerball last week or whenever that was. And so as a fan of a team or an observer of a team, hey, you'd love that big move, and why can't we just have a monster bat replace the crappy bat? Quarters and dimes add up over time to dollars. And so if you get a little bit better, Abreu to Singleton, if Diaz would get to catch some more relative to Maldonado, which is still just inexplicably ridiculous. Actually, it's explicably ridiculous. It's Dusty. If Pena can ratchet the OPS to where he was last year, which wasn't really good, but 713 is better than 680. Every little bit matters when you're trying to chase down the Rangers and fend off the Blue Jays, Mariners, the Red Sox. The Astros have a chance to really put them to sleep over the next couple of weeks with them playing 7 games. But, the Astros go up next week to Fenway, or a couple of weeks to Fenway, and drop a series there. The Red Sox somehow come down here and win 3 out of 4. Boston suddenly is too close for comfort. So it's anxious times looming potentially for the Astros. But as baseball fans, this is great. Just having the two-front war, if you will, to pursue day in, day out. Every game is so much more important than when you're 11 games ahead in mid-August.
Well, we're going to talk more about John Singleton and Jose Abreu in the next segment in part 2, because that's it for part 1. And if you want to hear part 2, then you can go to your podcast provider and download the full version of the episode, or you can wait for part 2 of this podcast right here on YouTube. Check out the Stone Cold Stros playlist, and we'll be releasing those videos very shortly. And as always, go Stros.